This podcast is made possible in part by the generous contribution of our Smart Insiders Plus members. If you're not a member, join in now. Just go to smartrecovery.org/insiders.
Hello, and welcome to the Smart Recovery Podcast. I'm your host, Luke Frazier. Today on the podcast, we're going to talk with Pam Mulready. She is Project Coordinator, Youth Recovery in Connecticut, and a Smart Recovery Facilitator. Pam Mulready, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Luke. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. Let's start where I like to start with folks to talk a little bit about themselves. If you want to share some of your personal and professional background and really what brought you to the field you're currently in.
Sure. Thank you for asking. I will say that I became clean and sober at the age of 21. I was in my senior year of college, and I had spent pretty much all 4 years, minus the first 3 weeks, either drunk or high every single day. It was really devastating in many ways, to my mental health, to my educational goals, to my personal relationships. And I found myself having just a crisis in the middle of my senior year. I had to take some time away from school. When my friends were graduating, I was actually in rehab. And I really just felt crushed and like I had screwed up my life. I had no idea how things had gotten to that place or, how I would have hope that it would get any better. But luckily, during the time that I was in rehab, people had brought meetings to the facility, and we received a lot of education and examples of people who were in recovery. And I just absorbed everything I could. And I said, well, I don't know how life is going to go from here, but I do know that if I don't use drugs or alcohol from this day forward, it can only get less complicated.
What that's an interesting conclusion early on, or you're in rehab. Why complicated? I mean, I've heard before people say life can get better, life can not be so painful, but what is the idea of complication?
Yeah, Luke, that's an interesting question. I think on my end, I had a lot of concerns about my mental health. I have bipolar disorder, and I wasn't sure how much was the impact of substances and how much was the mental illness itself. So I think my idea at that time was just subtract the most chaotic elements, knowing that other people said it improved their lives, and to see what could be done to improve the mental health along with that.
Okay.
So I think that's the purpose of choosing the word complicated.
Okay.
And it did make life less complicated. It was still a really difficult journey. But I have been sober, over 20 years now since that decision. And it allowed me to really focus in two ways, both on the mental health and on the recovery as sort of a dual recovery path. I was able to return to school to finish up my bachelor's degree. I then took a couple of years of just working in retail and healing. And then I went back to school and received a master's degree in counseling for both alcohol and drug recovery as well as mental health. And it's been a joy to be able to share a little bit of my life experience with folks to the extent that it's appropriate, as well as just the skills I've learned throughout my training. And I think it's a new leg of my journey over the last 5 years to share that in a peer support model like SMART.
Right. I do understand that I think basically understood why you said complicated, because I myself, I'm in recovery. And, one of the best things that happens in life when people are working, some kind of program of recovery, be it SMART or something else, is there's so much less drama in your life, so much less, ups and downs and look at this and, oh no, here comes that. It's just, it's less dramatic, and that's a good thing. It's just more even keel.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. I've heard, people in different fellowships say, every time I drink, I break out in handcuffs. Um, you know, and I think there's so much truth to that mindset that if at the very least I don't drink or use drugs or alter my mood in any of those type of ways, I know that I have just a baseline for functioning, that I am less likely to run into trouble, financially, socially, educationally, and spiritually with my mental health and all these life areas. And
Exactly.
for some people, it also includes health and, legal issues. It's really amazing how many realms of your life active addiction can impact
Yeah.
negatively. And conversely, if you are in good, solid recovery, how it can enhance all those same areas of your life.
Absolutely. Smart talks about living a balanced life and living
Mhm.
life beyond addiction. But, you're
Yes.
right. I have not been arrested for drunk driving ever since I've been sober. I mean, it just hasn't happened.
Right.
so, um, so how did you discover smart recovery?
Smart recovery was something that I discovered in two different phases. One was when I was in early recovery, around, age 21 or 22. I had been to a lot of 12-step meetings, and I've gained a lot from them. I do have a lot of respect for that path, but it isn't an exact fit for me. So I was searching for something that I just felt more comfortable in. There really wasn't anything around back then, which is something I often say to people who attend meetings that I'm facilitating. You're so lucky that SMART is so accessible, because this was not always the case.
Mm,
So I had driven myself to a library halfway across the state, and I got the old Rational Recovery book. I think it was the only place in the state that had it, and it was old and crinkly, and I probably was the only person who took it out since, 82. But I really felt heartened that there was something out there that took a perspective that was a little more based in the things that we do use in the counseling world to be able to assist people in making behavior change. And that sort of started me on this path of there are alternatives. And then down the line, through the internet, I was able to
yeah.
run into Smart Recovery itself.
Right.
And I used to put it up on the computer and projected on a screen for people that were coming to intensive outpatient program with me, to say, look at this program, look at all these great tools that are free on this website. And I would always say, unfortunately, there's only meetings down in New Haven at that
Okay.
time, which was not in the area that I was working in. I said, if you can get down to New Haven, there are some great meetings down there I hear really good things about, but at this time, that's really how we can access it. We can also order the book, we can look at the website. Um, and over the years now, anyone with a very simple click of a button can enter a smart meeting.
Right.
Anyone in the world, it's phenomenal. So
Yeah.
I'm
That
just
kind of
thrilled.
access. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And boy, let me go back to your motivation for driving. I think you said halfway across the state,
Yes.
for seek this information. I mean, that is someone who's motivated to explore a pathway that they had not heard of or recently heard of, and there you go, kind of looking for yourself. I mean, talk about self empowerment, which is another foundational principle of SMART. We have our own self empowerment and our own practical things to follow, and our own mutual support, of course. But there is a lot about self empowerment. Do you cover that with some of the folks in the meetings?
Yeah, I think it's a really important component of our model that we have the capability of changing our lives. I love that tagline, life beyond addiction. I don't want to be someone that is constantly of the mindset of I have this thing and I just cannot get past it. I want to say, yes, this thing has impacted my life, but I've moved beyond this. I have skills, I have tools, I have community, and I love my life today. That's the perspective I want to take. So at that time, I read, I can't even tell you how many books about addiction and recovery, and just trying to find anything that would help move me forward to enjoy my life again.
Right. That's Pam Mulready. She is project coordinator for youth recovery in Connecticut. She's also a smart recovery facilitator. So you've discovered smart recovery. Where did the journey go from there to kind of what you're doing today with youth? How is that connected?
When I was working as a therapist, I started to see a lot of young people come through treatment, and they're a unique population. The needs of someone who's 22 in recovery are not the same as the needs of someone who's 45. And my heart just really went out to them as a specific subset of young people. And I started thinking more about my journey through college, and just the fact that I don't want other people to have to suffer in some of the ways that I did, if it's at all avoidable through information, support, and people sharing their stories. So at that time, I noticed there was a job open at one of the local colleges for the substance abuse educator. And I said, I think I've recovered enough from my time at school that I can now be of service to this population.
Mhm.
So I started working at two different colleges, providing their substance abuse education plan for the year, as well as directly providing the education. And I pulled recovery into it as much as I could to say we need to talk about prevention, we need to talk about harm reduction, and we really need to start talking about recovery so people can feel welcomed into that community who may need it and may not know that that's a lifestyle choice they can opt into.
Yeah. Well, I think with college age as well, or youth, even if not in college, there's can be a thirst for education and a thirst for a program to follow. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have classes. A long time ago for me, Pam, as far as college, but kids, I'll call them kids in college, are used to kind of following maybe a syllabus or a reading list or something like that. So, what SMART provides is some of those practical tools, some of them based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and just doing some pen to paper work. Do you think that's part of what applies to youth and college age participants in SMART?
I love that you said pen and paper right there. So I think it's one thing to have the SMART manual or to hear the tools. It's another thing to diligently sit down and meet with yourself and grind through the tools to be able to have a really lasting change. So I always encourage folks to do the writing. Writing has been a huge part of my recovery. And I think you're on the money as well with people want to know what to do. It's very disorienting to find yourself with any type of destruction of choice, as we call it. Um, you just feel like you're off of the plan that everybody else has. You wonder a lot of why me. You're not really clear on the trajectory of getting back to who you hope to be or who you might have been. And it's good to have some examples of how other people have done it and some structure. However, one thing I do love about SMART is that it's not overly prescriptive. We have the tools, but we also say go to any type of recovery group that you like.
You're in charge.
Whoever.
You're in charge of your own recovery, and there are multiple pathways, but there's SMART as a great option.
Yes, yes. So I love that there is just some flexibility that people don't have to fight the program. They are able to come in and attend as fits their life. I always encourage consistency, especially early in recovery, but I do think sometimes it happens that people join different types of programs and find them a little restrictive. And I think SMART allows for that power of choice that we talk about.
Yeah. So Talk to me a little bit about some of the challenges and rewards. You've mentioned some of the things that are so great about working with youth and how
Mhm.
you can help them, but what are some of the challenges and rewards of working with youth?
I find it extremely rewarding. I just love to watch people connect with recovery and to have hope that they too can change their lives and to know that there are other people out there like them and that they're not in this alone. I just think we have limited time on this earth.
Yeah.
It's so important to share what we know and to help others along in ways that we've been helped.
Mm, kind of a that sense of isolation can be broken. That sense of isolation and all these walls around us can be kind of maybe just put to the side a little bit.
Yeah, I think with the younger population specifically, there is so much rampant substance use within their age group, and it's used for many reasons, but a lot of it is as sort of a social lubricant. So it is all the much more important for young people to see that there are other people who have run into trouble with certain behaviors and who have chosen to make changes in those parts of their lives in order to see improvement. So I often hear during the college age meeting, everybody's drinking, all of my friends are still going out. I feel lonely. So it's important for them to hear other folks say, I felt really lonely too, but I have found new friends, or I felt lonely at first, but I have found new ways to interact with a few of my old friends safely, or to hear people say, there are other things other than going out.
Mm,
I play guitar now. I go to the gym now. I'm really invested in my classes now. And I've just changed the way I look at life, that is not the most important thing. And it's a sacrifice that I have to make to some extent, but it's one I'm choosing to make because it improves my life experience.
right. And as you said, they're hearing that directly from their peers. Directly, here's what I did. Here's what happened to me.
Yeah.
And that's different than, maybe at least initially, it's different than reading it in a book,
Hmm.
and looking at those worksheets and wondering, where is this going to get me? What do I need to do? And motivation can come from that. You think that's true, that motivation can come from hearing other people's success?
100%. I often say in my meeting that I can tell them till I'm blue in the face, like it gets better. Early recovery is a small bit of hell, but after that, life gets better.
Just that, how many rings of Dante's rings is that? Is that the
All
first
of them,
ring or?
all of them, multiple times. However, if you can be brave enough and strong enough to get through that, like other people have, the other side of it is a life that you're proud of and that you want and that you could not have imagined. Um, Nobody believes me, and that's okay. But they do believe someone who's a year ahead of them in recovery, or they do feel heartened when they hear, I'm really lonely, and someone else says, yeah, me too. And then they're able to say, like, okay, that's okay. Other people have this, and now I can focus on what are some possible ways to deal with this instead of just being entranced by there's a problem, there's a problem, there's a problem.
Right.
So I find the peer connection is the most important part. And as a facilitator, it's really my job as much as possible to step back and let the people talk to each other because they know what it's like to be a young person today and they just want to hear from other young people. I just sort of create the space in which they can meet each other.
Yeah. And the benefit of that honesty you mentioned, that when someone can say, "Hey, I'm lonely,"
Mhm.
and put it out there, and it's not reporting to someone, it's talking with your peers. So that sounds like, I was going to ask you about best practices about working with youth, and it sounds like a little bit of that stepping away and creating environment sounds like a best practices. A best practice. Are there other best practices that kind of you discovered in your experience?
Yeah, I will say that I try to really stick with the tenets of SMART as much as I can in a meeting. It may be the 110th time that someone's heard the ABCs, but if there's a new person, they may need to know that. Also, we learn by repetition. So I think it's important that we share our very valuable tools, why they're important. We encourage other people to talk about how they're using the tools and that we do that repetitively. I will say also it's important to make sure that we are giving some basic recovery information. It's important for me to step away so peers can talk to each other, but it is also important to make sure people know the basics of just the tenets of recovery, that it's a lifestyle change and it's not just subtracting something from your life. It's important that you have a vital and absorbing creative interest and that you schedule and fill your time. It's important that you try out multiple types of meetings and find out one that's a good fit for you. So there's some very basic pieces of information that someone, especially in that age group who may have not been to treatment before and may not have been to many meetings before, needs to know. So I try to infuse my meetings always with just those basic components. Even if that's the only meeting they ever attend, for the next 5 years, at least they've gotten a toolkit of basic recovery information they can take on their journey and reflect on.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, very well put. This idea that you're not just taking away things, but you're adding to, that you're bringing things to the table that people can say, that could work for me.
Mm-hmm.
And what is this thing about a vital absorbing interest? Well, I used to be interested in this more, and I kind of gave that up because I was busy going out and, partying. But now I can get back to that. And, just realizing that there's things to add back to your life. That sounds very important.
Yeah. Another thing I'll add to that is just the idea that people are often engaging in these behaviors because they're hurting in some way. I see a lot of folks with just unresolved trauma, other mental health conditions, significant stressors, lack of support system, things like that. So I think along with the smart tools, it's important to acknowledge that people may have an entire constellation of different issues that they're dealing with, and that we encourage people to avail themselves of all kinds of resources. It could be that therapy is really important for them. It could be they need to see a doctor for their health. They may need to explore medications. They may need to engage further with their spirituality. They may need just some very basic other supports to help with that lifestyle balance. So I always like to acknowledge recovery doesn't do the whole job. It just makes things much less complicated, like I mentioned before, and allows you sort of the hope and freedom to put other things in place that will also support your well-being.
Yeah, hope and freedom. How important that is, and seeing how that can add to your life. That just again strikes me as very important. One thing we haven't talked about is social media, and I don't want to get into this in any real degree of depth, but it occurs to me that when you talk about how and what kids are facing today, what youth are facing, there's an aspect of their lives that's can be consuming, and that would be social media. And I think specifically comparing yourself to others that you see on social media out there having a good time. I mean, you don't see consequences on social media. You don't see what happens after someone leaves a party. You just understand or think you understand how great it is. So, do you think social media, in just a general sense, can be kind of a hindrance to recovery?
Yes, definitely, but depending on the way people use it. So I think social media can be used like any tool, and a tool can be helpful. A lot of people can get good information and connect with other people in meaningful ways. The flip side of that is there is a lot of misinformation, particularly right now, and particularly around the issue of mental health on social media. And I do think for younger folks, there can be, for any of us, frankly, there can be comparing that happens. Like you mentioned, there is a lot of just craving that can happen to
Mm,
be better, to be
mm,
famous, to look a certain way, to have certain credentials or a certain sense of humor or just a
yeah.
certain amount of knowledge that you're able to share. And I am sad, really deeply sad that so many people are spending so many hours peering into this rectangle instead of living their lives.
Right.
So I do think it's critical, just as a society at this point, that we bring intentionality to our media use and we say, how many hours a day do
Yeah.
I want to spend on this?
Right. And
How do I want it to impact me? How do I feel when I'm scrolling? What is my purpose with this? And knowing that there are only so many hours in the day, would this be better spent reading, making art, having a really
yeah.
good conversation,
Right.
walking outside and breathing fresh air, going to a meeting, anything else?
Yeah, I think you're talking about being mindful and being aware,
Yeah.
and not just accepting it as kind of par for the course. And I share that deep concern, that sadness over some of the ways that there's a distinction or a difference between living life through a screen versus really engaging with others, engaging with the world. So, and I think that wraps back to smart recovery and this idea of living a healthy and balanced life, living a life beyond addiction, creating for yourself and with your peers a different, an alternative to maybe more of the typical kinds of things that you mentioned that even you and certainly me got involved in as a youth. So that's really important, and I'm glad you were able to offer that kind of that kind of insight. Um, Anything else? Actually, I do have something else. I wonder if you can give a quick example of a youth, of course, with anonymity, that kind of came to one of your meetings and how they progressed and maybe where they are today. I guess you could say kind of a success story.
Oh, there's so many success stories that I've seen. I think anyone who makes it to a meeting is a success story. Anyone who is brave enough to say, I think I have to make some life changes and I'm willing to be vulnerable to get the information that I need. I think I give people a lot of credit. I've worked with a lot of older folks that, they've been in and out of treatments for 30 years and they've never stepped foot in a meeting. So anytime I see someone 19 show up at a recovery meeting, I think it's a great success.
Yeah, great
Um,
point. Great point.
yeah, I see so much. So trajectory in one of my meetings may be that someone arrives, they're with anonymity with the screen name and screen off. We have screen off in my meeting for many people if they choose. And they may listen. They may listen for 3 or 4 meetings. And then they may start putting something in the chat, hi, I'm, Bunny 22. I've been coming for 4 weeks. I really enjoyed this meeting. I just wanted to say hi.
Mm.
And it may be 2 meetings later that they want to check in and they say, hi, I've been kind of lurking. And we're like, congratulations on graduating from lurking. That's a common phase in our meeting.
Your degree in non-lurking.
Yes, yes, congratulations. And then they'll start to share a little bit of their story and, some things that are close to their heart. We always have an ability to ask for a discussion topic. So someone will say, my discussion topic today is I just can't stop thinking about using, and I just want to know how other people deal with cravings. And that way we can sort of crowdsource the answer when it's the discussion period of the meeting and hear how other people manage that. Other people just saying, yes, I have felt that way too, but it got better. And also just hearing from the facilitators some of the tried and true smart methods of dealing with urges and cravings. And with folks that have come to the meeting, it is often that they feel isolated from others. They feel that recovery may be something that they're in alone, and there is just a joy in joking around. We have a lot of humor in my meetings, and joking around and meeting other young people who may also be in school, who may also have had a car accident or a legal charge, or had their mental health just really plummet while they were engaged with substances. And to hear that people are able to address their legal charges or heal from their injury or go back to school this semester and do it differently, or be in therapy and be using the tools for improving their mental wellness along with using them for recovery. So it's a beautiful thing to
Yeah.
see. And we have people come back to meetings,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
maybe someone has been coming for months. They have reoccurrence of some of their behaviors, and then they know they have a community they can come right back to and say, I was here, I was doing great, things became chaotic, and I'm back, and I want to do this again, I want to do it better. So that's beautiful to see. There are also people who stay consistently in the meeting. I've had people in meetings for years, and now I have someone who is transitioning to be a smart facilitator who has been coming to meetings every week, every week, every week for years. So I think that's a remarkable journey to take as a young person. And I encourage young people to think in that direction. If they have 6 months away from their destruction of choice, they love smart meetings. They feel they have a drive to contribute. It's a beautiful thing. We want as many facilitators as we can get because there are so many people who can benefit from this help.
Yeah. So there's so many ways to succeed. I really love that showing up at a meeting is a hallmark of success. And then all the trajectories you mentioned, just such wonderful kinds of journeys that people go on. And I'm sure your skill and presence as a facilitator really aids a lot of people. Anything else, Pam, before we wrap up here that you'd like to say about your work or kinds of things that you've experienced?
I will add two things. One is just anybody can get into recovery. If I can do it and I can keep it up for, decades, you can do it too. I didn't believe it at the time. I thought it was impossible, and I was one of the only ones that wasn't going to make it, and it just wasn't true. And just one foot in front of the other, keep connected with community, keep curious about recovery, keep it fresh, and just keep values based and enjoying what you love. So I wanted to just throw that out there as something hopeful and no one believes, but is absolutely true.
Okay, good, good.
Also, I would like to just talk about Youth Recovery CT. We're doing amazing things here in Connecticut. We have a very large team of people who are trained to provide smart recovery meetings for the teenage group, which is 16 to 18, for the young adult group, which is 18 to about 29. And a lot of those meetings are online, and anyone can come to a Connecticut youth meeting. So we have our website, Youth Recovery CT. People are welcome to pop on there, see our meeting schedule. And if there's something local you can get to, wonderful. If there is something online that you would like to join, we would love to have you here in Connecticut. We also have family meetings. So we do the Family and Friends program here in Connecticut. There's a schedule on the website for that as well. So we encourage parents or siblings or concerned friends to make use of the Family and Friends program. It's a completely different tool set. It's so important, and we want everyone impacted by addiction or harmful behaviors in any way to get the tools from science that they need to support themselves and to journey along with their loved one.
That's excellent information. I really appreciate you offering that and really getting the information out there. It's so important. We've been talking with Pam Mulready. She's a project coordinator in youth recovery in Connecticut. and a Smart Recovery facilitator. Pam, thank you so much for being on the program. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Luke, what a pleasure to be able to talk about recovery with you today. I thank you for the opportunity.
You've been listening to the Smart Recovery Podcast. I'm Luke Frazier. Until next time on the podcast, stay healthy and stay connected.